It helps to have the microphone on. I'm getting rusty after this month-long break. Very lovely to see all of you, and I'm excited to talk through the agenda items today. Can we start by calling the roll, please?
Commissioner Metz?
Here.
Commissioner Tucker?
Here.
Commissioner Gupta?
Here.
Commissioner Sharf? It's not present. Commissioner Croft?
Here.
Vice Chair Phillips?
Here.
Chair Motter?
Here.
For the record, 6 present.
Are there any agenda changes, additions, or deletions for tonight's meeting?
Not a change, but I did want to mention that we updated the 12-month calendar. We left it in front of you, emailed also, and it's also available to the public, not only in the room, but also on the website.
Excellent.
Chair, I'd like to ask about the agenda, but maybe you'd like me to delay that.
Please. I think we can talk about the agenda either in our discussion of the 12-month rolling calendar. I think that's the appropriate place to talk about it.
No, today's agenda is what I want to talk about.
Well, today's agenda is on the 12-month rolling calendar, so I think that that's the correct place to talk about it. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Are there any in-person public comments today?
We do not have any requests to speak in person today.
Excellent. We'll now proceed to approval of the minutes. Do we have any comments or discussion on this week's minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
I would like to ask about the minutes. And that is my specific questions around the work plan drafted in red line in the minutes. And there was a comment in the minutes that will present them to council as soon as I think August 8th or 10th. So next week. This isn't a question about editing or changing the minutes other than to ask what's the status of that work plan? Maybe that's in director's report?
Yeah, the director's report will cover when that comes to council. Do I have a second to approve the minutes?
I'll second.
Okay, could we call the roll on or call a vote on the minutes?
Commissioner Gupta?
Abstain.
Vice Chair Phillips?
Approve.
Chair Motter?
Approve?
Commissioner Tucker?
Yes, or approve.
Commissioner Croft?
Approve.
Commissioner Metz?
Yes.
Motion passes with 5 yeses and 1 abstain.
Fabulous. Okay, we will now proceed to the Utilities Director report.
Great. So everyone, it's great to see everyone again after this little break. I wanted to give you some good news first on some legislation that passed. It was AB 34. It was sponsored by Assemblymember Patterson, Senator Becker, and Assemblymember Berman. What AB 34 did is essentially take a look at our investments in large hydro and acknowledge that was not going to be a detriment in terms of our renewable portfolio standard. So very successful in showing the value to Palo Alto, but also not having us over procure for renewable energy resources. So staff provided an estimate of a $25 million potential impact to the utility between 2030 and 2045. So it was signed by the governor. So we're very pleased with that and wanted to provide that information to the UAC. Just a brief update to fiber to the premises. In our 12-month calendar, I'll give you a full update, but the fiber hut has been completed earlier this year. So in totality, that will allow us to ultimately serve up to 850 residents in that area or customers. And we're currently going with some early adopters. So we have about a dozen customers right now we're working with in terms of how we install, their experience, working through some of the startup issues that you would have. So we're bringing more information back to the UAC in October. So I appreciate that. And I understand there may be more questions from the UAC commissioners, and more than willing to take and input some of that information at a later time. Our gas main replacement program, number 25, is making significant progress. The crews have installed almost 10,000 linear feet and about 220 gas services in our primary residential area. Just want to remind you that this was funded through a federal grant. As you may recall, we received about $16.5 million. So this reinvestment in our system is coming from federal resources, and it does also reduce our greenhouse gas impact because leaks from our gas mains, and when talking to our climate action folks, represents about 3% of that coming from our gas utility. Also, some other good news is our Foothill Wildfire Mitigation Project. The contractor has installed significant amount of conduits. We're going through and installed the cables and looking at energizing that line. So we're very pleased to have that being done, and we're expecting this to be completed by the end of the calendar year. Because of the heat out there, we do not have crews actively working in some situations if it's not critical or a high business need because of the higher fire threats. So you'll see some of our crews coming off and working in those areas and working, frankly, outside of the foothills and the fire threat areas. And then, as you may have heard, the Arrastadero Creek rehabilitation and pipeline relocation. There was winter storms in 2023 that exposed some of our utilities. So we have gone through a process of making interim repairs, but now we have to make those long-term repairs. So staff, I would mention Principal Engineer Aaron Perkins, went to the Parks and Recreation Commission and talked about the restoration activities that we'll be doing. We're also relocating where we can some of those pipelines outside of those areas that can be eroded and putting it in different parts. So we have a whole plan with that, and we're getting information and feedback from the community and also the regulatory agencies. And last, I wanted to talk about this meeting here. This meeting here is a little bit lighter on the agenda, so I did want to address that with the commission. We did have a conversation with the chair and vice chair, looking at trying to move items forward, and we really just weren't able to do that with some of our staff being, frankly, out this month, and just trying to get those items to you at a full and complete state. So as you may have looked back in our previous agendas, we were really anticipating bringing you forth some power purchase agreements that we've been working with Northern California Power Agency and other agencies. We got about 60 potential projects through that process. The majority of those were battery only. We were really looking forward to negotiating with 3 or more of those power purchase agreements. Ultimately, those did not move forward between the cities and those developers. We are looking at that next batch that are competitive. So once we have some further details on that, and we're looking at solar and storage options, we'll bring that back to the UAC. But that is not on calendar yet, and we'll go through that. So I just wanted to give you an update of why we have not the full length of that item here in this meeting, and why there is a little bit lower amount of activity items coming to the UAC. And that completes my report.
May I?
Yes, are there any questions for?
Sorry, I did want to mention the date. So on the UAC plan, the 12-month calendar, you'll see that we have an estimated date to bring this to City Council, I believe on the October 5th meeting.
Yes.
And when you do take a look at the UAC work plan, we'll get to that. We did add a lot of your now adopted work plan items there. So you see the specifics. And as we go through that work plan, we really loaded that plan up to try to fill it out for those 12 months, and would love to get your input on that, because we're trying to manage the schedule and the items that go to you, and make sure that we're not overly burdening you on any month.
Okay.
To your last point about the light schedule or agenda today, I'm sorry to sound critical. Everyone wants vacation. We hear constantly of all of the big issues that are on the work plan. One can only do so much so fast. There's a lot there's a lot to cover, only 15 items, and there were requests for 16, 17 on the work plan. This is a one-topic agenda tonight. We're going to talk about Sadie, Katie, and Safi. I mean, we can kind of dial that one in. We took last month off, and the month before that, we had another one-topic agenda, which was just discussing our work plan. I mean, if we are reporting to council, I have to think in council's shoes, we're not giving them very much. This is 3 months of essentially no activity. And I don't understand why agenda items could not be moved up. Staff is on vacation, but not for 3 months, not all staff. I just don't get it.
So in looking at the items coming in September, and not all staff on vacation, so that was a glib response, and I apologize for that. We do look at the items in terms of the totality. So if you look at your September meeting, the reserve management policy is a very significant item for the UAC to bring forth. We really looked hard at bringing that forward to this meeting, and it was not at the level that we thought it was necessary to be complete. So we're not going to bring you something that's not ready to be baked. Again, this agenda was anticipating talking about 1 or 2 power purchase agreements and meeting all those requirements in terms of the UAC's needs and those projections of how that fits in our portfolio. And we're expecting a very meaty discussion in terms of that. I also would like to push back on the UAC work plan. That is a significant effort by this body to plan out your objectives for the year.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's something that, I mean, all likelihood will go in front of council maybe 2 months from now. It'll come back maybe in October like it did last year. And we'll have a work plan for the year when the year's a third over. So, I mean, that's not staff, that's not on you, but that is the value of the work plan process from a cynical point of view.
So understand that perspective. And as we look at the rolling calendar, we can talk about how we are mapping out the objectives that were just approved by this body today and what we anticipate and how to serve those needs.
Are there any other questions or comments for the Utilities Director? Okay, hearing none. I would like to move on to agenda item number 2, the calendar year 2025 reliability metric update.
But I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in one more time. So we're leaving the director's report?
I just asked.
Yeah, my fault, because I'm going to ask 2 more questions if I may, please.
Sure, go for it.
Since our last meeting, there was a council meeting where all of our discussion over the urban water management plan went in front of council. I think 1 or 2 of us here, or one of us may have represented UAC. My understanding of the council's meeting was that they did approve the urban water management plan. We voted, I think, 3-3 in a draw or tie. But there was consensus feedback from council, 4 or 5 of them, that we take next steps. And one of those steps seemed to be, it was a bit vague, but one of the steps seemed to be look towards a study session. I don't know exactly what a study session is, but we've had this before.
Yeah, that's actually on the 12-month rolling calendar. And so I think
be a report back
we
from
can discuss that when that comes forward.
Okay, good. And then, I mean, I have thoughts on how the director's report could become more comprehensive, more informative, and more of a link from prior meetings. Like, what did we leave open last month? What did council cover since we last met? But I believe you've attended BOSCA meetings, correct me if I'm wrong, since we last met. And if that's true, I'd love to hear your impressions. There were some, I think, there was a very important June BOSCA meeting where our city representative, Vice Mayor Stone, spoke strongly. There was intense dialogue with SFPUC. That would seem to be an appropriate update in a director's report. Do you Are you able to comment on that at all?
Well, we did have some direction from council and that, or it's in the 12-month calendar. I thought that'd be a better place to describe it in terms of what the council action was. Yes, we do have staff that attend BOSCA meetings. I have attend more than one BOSCA meeting in my time. So that is not uncommon for staff to attend. It's also something that is live streamed and is available for the public.
I'm sorry to interrupt. My point is, if it's something you attended, I would submit it's an important update. If there was anything substantial in the BOSCA meeting, it would be important to hear about that in a director's report. That's my view.
The director's report is at the discretion of the director. And so I think it's a little bit hard to force, coverage of specific topics. But if there's a set of, I know that we have had conversations about a PowerPoint slide in which we covered anything that had carryover from the past meeting. And I think if we could continue that practice, I think it would be deeply appreciated.
Yes, I appreciate that as well. And that's the intent. I was actually talking to staff earlier today on how we can make that tied to this calendar. So it's
Right.
much more transparent in terms of having that information. And I appreciate also that I cannot give summary to all the things I may or may not attend. And that was also a presentation to BOSCA. We have one coming up. So that information is helpful in terms of our staff looking at and bringing that in the joint session. But I don't want to talk about an item that we're trying to talk about on my calendar.
Yep. All right.
Sorry, when are we talking about this item in the calendar?
The very last, this is on the calendar as the joint session with City Council and BOSCA on water demand forecast, which is item number 13. It falls in the items to be scheduled category, but I believe that's as a result of calendaring challenges. Again, I would prefer to cover this during the part of the meeting in which it is agendized, just to follow.
But when we talk about the schedule, I believe we're just talking about the schedule. We're not talking about anything substantive. If there was a meeting, I think it does make sense. Why can't we ask about it?
We can definitely ask about it. That's
so
fine.
as part of the director's report, I think it's appropriate to ask for it.
But
Because if it gets calendared, who knows when it's going to get calendared? It becomes old information, and this body has been interested in water, so it feels like if there's any information you can give us, you can tell us to go watch the meeting. But if there's anything,
Our vice
I'm
mayor
curious
asked the
too.
toughest questions of SFPUC that have been asked to date on the design draft.
At the meeting, there were several BOSCA representatives that spoke. If there's an interest for me to bring that back and we put it on the agenda and provide that, I can certainly do that. But we're also doing a study session on this. Maybe what I can do is provide some information on what has transpired at that meeting and give some summary to that. But we are going to have a joint session.
November or December.
We are going to plan to have a joint session with the city council on that. And some of that information provided by BOSCA was timely, but also that's a part of what's going to feed into that joint session.
Just in terms of policy and procedure and how we run this meeting, absolutely asking content questions about director activities is appropriate during the director's report. My understanding is that your question had been about when that was going to be scheduled, and what the council actions were on that, that were going to be covered in that joint session. And that is the only reason I suggested we cover it during the 12-month rolling calendar, just for your reference as well. We should ask questions about director activities during the director's report. Are there any other?
Where after Commissioner Croft's request, what comes from that question? What was the answer? I guess
That is on Alan. I cannot,
yeah,
I was not there.
Is it that we can't have a summary because it wasn't your topic? Is that why we can't have a summary?
I don't have the PowerPoint in front of me to give
No.
that for me to provide that. Commissioner Tucker and to the rest. I would like to provide some of that information and context to that because it was a deeper dive in terms of their drought plans, their 7-year drought. There was question and answers. So I want to be comprehensive in that because there's a lot of interest in the community, especially on that topic. There were folks from Palo Alto there, right? So I don't want to minimize or marginalize our participation. Yes, we were actively engaged. Palo Alto is very actively engaged in Bosca. I myself and other staff attend those meetings, but those are the meetings for the Bosca board. What I would like to do, and what we're going to do, is start preparing what that agenda looks like based on council direction, and that ties to that joint session that the city council has asked us to work with the UAC on their schedule, bringing different speakers on, right? And that's an item to be calendared as well. So, we monitor the Bosca board meetings, and that was a very specific one to Commissioner Tucker's, interest as well. And yes, we support the vice mayor in terms of that as well. So
Okay.
that is different because we are supporting that commissioner as part of Bosca, and that is something that we normally do.
I'm sure you want to move on from director's report. So I got your point about it is at the discretion of the director, but perhaps we, UAC, could talk about what we'd like, or if we even want a director's report and what perhaps would be useful to have in it. So before we leave it, I'll come back to the original question of the light agenda. Do you two as chairs, you were in the discussion, I guess, to decide, let's not talk about anything more than outage metrics today. What was your view of that request?
I will not speak for the vice chair, but I will share that I was aligned with your perspective that we should have additional agenda items, but we do not direct the utilities work. And so if they said that they could not bring a new agenda item cannot be brought.
Thank you.
I was of the same opinion that this would be a light meeting, and given the amount of heavy topics we have coming up in the next 2 months, it would be great if we could push 1 or 2 of them to this meeting. I was assured that that was not possible. And as the chair said, we cannot direct.
Can I do one last follow-up on the topic of the Bosca meeting? Okay, so that was very helpful what you just told us, just in terms of, there was a Bosca meeting. A lot of Palo Alto staff and residents were involved. There was a request to put it on as a joint meeting with the city council. I wasn't aware that there was a Bosca meeting and that all of this went on. So when I hear like a very brief snippet, I'm kind of like, I'm going to have to go look something up. So I'd love it if something like that, just a brief, like there was a meeting, it was, it was significant, rather than it feeling like we have to, it's something secretive that we have to pull out. It's kind of like when we say we went to some meeting at the end of this meeting, we describe what other things we went to just to share our information. It would be helpful to have, even, it doesn't have to be substantive, just there was a meeting and we're going to do a follow-up to it. And it's going to come on the calendar because I didn't actually see that on the calendar before we just talked about it now.
Could I make a request that if there are elements of the director's report that people would like to see, I think it would be valuable to share that directly with the director in advance of the meeting, in a way that gives the director sufficient time to prepare a relevant summary. Now, obviously, that's at the discretion of staff. That is not our responsibility, but we can ask. And then I would say, generally, now that we have a 12-month rolling calendar and a work plan that may or may not be approved, but we can hope is approved. Those 15 topics, though long in length, serve as the core for what we're hoping to talk about. So topics of relevance to those 15 items may be a helpful way to think about inclusion or exclusion from that report.
Certainly, I do appreciate the feedback, especially in regards to this joint session with Bosca and SFPUC. I will take that as valuable input in terms of what I provide to this body. in the interim, if we'll provide some information on what has happened at that BOSCA board meeting, and if it, what I am hearing, you'd like to get more information as this specific type of issue comes up on BOSCA. There's other issues that come up on BOSCA, but in relation to this joint session, what I'm hearing loud and clear is you'd like me to give an update to that, and I can certainly do so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the director relevant to the director's report? Okay, I think we made it through that. Now, item number 2, the calendar year 2025 reliability metric update and annual system reliability goal setting, CEQA status, not a project, CEQA guidelines, section 15,387 or 78 B5 for the record.
Terry Crowley will provide the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, Terry Crowley, Chief Operating Officer for City's Utilities Department. Want to tonight talk about reliability metrics for the city, and then also get some feedback from the commission on goal setting on what the targets should be to improve those numbers for a variety of reasons. So next slide, please. So as a little bit of background, this item was brought to the City Council for discussion in March. We discussed the electric system reliabilities, how those match up with other related utilities in the area, in the region, and nationally, and proposed some reliability goals for the council. The council agreed with staff's initial recommendations, but also expressed its desire for goals that are specifically related to Palo Alto. So something that's looking at Palo Alto's performance and seeing how can we make that measure better. So staff is tonight seeking that input from the UAC to help provide those recommendations for council's final approval. Next slide, please. So in general, utilities measure reliability in 3 metrics. These are the primary metrics. There's other metrics that are out there, but these are the primary metrics that utilities use. SAIDI, SAIFI, and CAIDI. Some of the problems with this is that it takes about 15 minutes to explain these indices to anybody. And then once you explain them, you have to spend a little bit more time explaining like how do they actually relate to that individual, and then how would you actually use those to improve. And that was one of the items that was provided as feedback to the council, is this is not succinct and it doesn't really help to sell the message of electrification within the community. How reliable is the system? So is there a quick messaging? Is there a quick target that really for the consumer can identify what's the reliability of the system? Now, again, these still remain useful for utility benchmarking between different utilities. They're an industry standard, they're out there, and we'll still continue to use those, but they do not provide a lot of benefit for the average electric consumer. Next slide, please. So looking at the SAIDI, SAIFI, CAIDI numbers, these are numbers through 2019 through 2025. One of the things that we've recently done is that we've broken out the numbers into 2 categories, one that includes major event days and one that excludes major event days. Again, that is a common utility practice to do that. It provides staff the ability to look at how the system performs with storms included and how the system performs without storms. So more of the day-to-day activities and more of that driving routine outages that you may see. For the city, we are looking at establishing major event days as 10% or more of Palo Alto customers being affected by an outage or affected within a 24-hour period. And one thing to note here as well is in 2023, the city implemented new software that improved the accuracy. So some comparisons between reliability indices before 2023 and after are not exactly correct, but they're still useful. So next slide, please.
Gary, can I ask just a clarifying question on the slide? I just didn't understand this. The definition of major event days as defined by the percentage of system outage rather than by the type of event itself seemed like there was an endogeneity problem that could arise. And I'm just wondering if there are other, like, this is like a major weather event or like an earthquake or like, something that's exogenous to the system rather than this possibility of, like you could have a major system outage because you didn't update your you didn't keep your transformers in good shape and like a huge swath of the city went out, but that's squarely on us rather than like not on us. And so was there any like, is there a different version of major event day that makes that sort of fault a little bit clearer?
So there in the industry, there's two major or widely accepted versions of how you define a major event day. One is more of a legacy. It's a 10% of the customers affected in a 24-hour period. The other is a newer method and more statistically probably valid, but it's called the 2.5 beta method. And basically what it does is it takes the total average outage minutes per day, takes the standard deviation of that, multiplies it by 2.5 beta. There's a little bit more math into that. And then it comes up with a range saying that, hey, if you have a day that's more than this outage plus this 2.5 of the standard deviation, that becomes a major event day. It doesn't necessarily look at weather events or earthquakes or these things that are really what you would consider beyond the control or beyond the expectation. So there could be a major equipment failure that could create a major event day. And that's one of the things the city does see is we do see that there are certain outages on certain circuits in the city that do create a major event day. I do think that there's still benefit in identifying those larger outages through this process of identifying major event day and looking at that and saying like, well, that's just kind of a normal equipment failure that we would see but it caused this larger outage. How do we isolate that or reduce that scope? If that's a recommendation from the commission through discussion that you would like to see something that's more tied to non-equipment failures or singular equipment failures in more weather events or multiple outages, right, which is typical in a winter storm. As you see multiple outages, your crews are only able to work so many outages at a time, and so the customer minutes rack up, the customers that are experiencing outage rack up. So that's something we could include into this, as part of that ongoing discussion. Staff will continue to triage large outages regardless of what that is. Next slide, please. So again, just to give perspective regionally and nationally and how the city performs with this. So these are 2024 numbers. At the time of producing the staff report, 2025 numbers were not available for each of these agencies. So PG&E clearly, there's not a lot of competition for the city, I guess would say, to meet their goals or exceed that performance. I think there is still value in benchmarking against PG&E and their local districts. So the De Anza district is a district that surrounds us. It's not a system-wide for PG&E. It's very localized. So the weather events, the climate, the density of population are all the same or relatively same. But I do think it's a good benchmark to continue because it's one of the things that demonstrates what's the value that the city of Palo Alto provides versus the most likely provider for Palo Alto if Palo Alto chose not to have an electric utility. So it gives that recommendation of like, hey, if you had PG&E as a provider, what would you expect to have for reliability? Comparing to Alameda and Santa Clara, Silicon Valley Power, we also show pretty well, but again, we start to come back into more normal ranges here, and we start to see something that I would say is more standard, what we would expect for reliability numbers. And again, looking nationwide, in the top quartile for all utilities, Palo Alto shows that it performs fairly well for that. So again, these are benchmarks that show how we perform against other agencies. But again, one of council's comments back was, what does that mean for Palo Alto and Palo Alto's performance, and what is truly the floor for Palo Alto to improve as far as reliability? Next slide, please.
About this chart, benefit having more numbers on it. That's the previous slide.
Noted. So next slide, please. So this gets to the meat of the discussion. And so proposed reliability goals. So the top two goals in this bullet point were the original proposals to the city council. It's not that they disagree with these, they just wanted things to go a little bit further. And to be more succinct and related to Palo Alto's performance versus somebody else's performance. So outperforming PG&E against De Anza district, again, I still think there's value in making that benchmark so that we can continue to show to our customers that there is value in having and operating your own electric utility. Continuing to look at the top quartile nationally for safety and safety, I think there's still value in looking at the top performing utilities nationwide and seeing how Palo Alto ranks. This performance goal would exclude major event days. The weather for California is different than the weather for Florida, Midwest, the Northwest, Northeast. And so comparing major event days that include storms and stuff like that is probably not a good apples to apples comparison. So this item here would exclude major event days. The one with PG&E would look at both system operations because we're having the same weather events. So in addition to these goals, and really to try and address the council's directive here, I've added in another target of average system availability. And the intent here is to really demonstrate to the customers how often or how much of the year is your system available to you to use. So if you take the total hours in a year, how often is that system available to you? And it's a measure, it's a percentage. It's also referenced in a lot of different industries about what your reliability is. And sometimes, it's discussed in levels of 9, 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines of reliability. And so looking at those numbers and what that means, staff is recommending using 4 nines as a reliability mark. That's equivalent to a SAIDI of 52.6 or less, right? We would generally try to improve and beat this goal. And then there's a discussion that the commission could provide to us is that, do you want to look at this with major days, event days included or excluded or both? Staff would suggest it's probably useful to look at it both ways, but I'd also caution and say that under major event days, in some years when we have heavy storms, you may not meet this reliability target. But when you exclude those major event days, those storm days, you're probably likely that staff could achieve this and maintain this over the long term. Additionally, for those customers that do experience outages, and that's what Katie measures, for customers that do actually experience an outage, what's their average duration? It's trying to shorten that average duration. So trying to speed our restoration process. So how fast can crews respond to an outage? How fast can we isolate and restore customers? And how fast can we repair that equipment? That's another metric that improves when you do have an outage, that you're not sitting there for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, that we're really trying to compress those outages to the least amount of time as possible. And so setting this target here of 190 or below is basically 10% less than the 3-year average. Once we reach that number, we can have more discussions about should that number go lower to continue to improve that outage restoration time. Next slide, please.
I just had a quick clarifying question on that point. You're recommending, staff is recommending below 190. We're not actually recommending the 10% 3-year average.
It's not really including that metric. We could look at that metric and using that, and that would be kind of a more long-lived goal, right? Because if the 3-year average continues to improve, you would go down. If the 3-year average increased, your goals would go up. So the thought is to really set a number, work from that number, and continue to reevaluate what can we do to lower that number over time.
Now, sounds good. I personally like the number better, but yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Just one clarification, Mr. Crawley, the 52.6 and the 190 are minutes. Correct?
Minutes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's missing throughout the presentation. It'd be helpful to have that.
It's being a utility person, that's his, yes.
Right, but to communicate to.
Yeah, exactly. To communicate to customers, these are
papers.
minutes. So for SAIDI and Katie, these are minutes. For safety, it's the number of outages per year that you would expect to be exposed to. So make that clarification there. Minutes. Next slide, please. So to graphically represent the proposed target of average system availability, if we took a 4 nines number, 52.56 of SAIDI, this is what it would look like against our historical performance. So in most years, we tend to perform well. Again, I would put that flag in there that in 2023, we provided more accurate outage reporting information. So the previous years may have been slightly underreported. But again, the 52.5 does not seem outside of reach compared to what the historical numbers are there. Next slide, please. And then so looking at Katie and that average restoration time and our numbers based on the historical values, excluding major event days, the 190 is a target that we seem to sometimes hit and sometimes not. And so this would be more of a goal that we would actually have to manage to continue to drive those numbers downward and actively continue to meet that. Next slide, please. So again, seeking recommendations from the commission on the 4 goals that are being proposed. Again, that the intent is to get that clarity, those recommendations. We'll take those back to council for final approval, and then staff would get to work on diving into the actual work and projects that would meet these goals. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
So, I guess as I kind of looked into this, I understand that this is very much kind of standard utility practice, but I kind of hate it, just to be honest. It doesn't tell me anything. And, you know, for all the things I like with metrics, it doesn't, you know, they're not independent, as I kind of figured out. SAIDI is equal to SAFE times Katie. They are not, as Chair Mauder said, they're highly endogenous in the sense that I can't extricate, you know, I can't tell from these if we're doing better or worse in a particular year, which is the thing I want from the metrics. And going back, thank you for the link, Commissioner Mauder. I went back and listened to the city council, and I think that's partly what at least some of the city council members were asking for. They're saying we're spending 375 million or whatever it is on grid modernization under the rubric that this is going to help reliability. So how does that show up in the metrics? And, you know, if I look at the metrics now, they've not improved, and I get it, there's a change in methodology in 2024, but literally if you do a regression on every single one of these, there is no change over this period. Does that mean we haven't gotten any better, or that there are more external factors at play? And I would kind of come back and say, what would help you get better? I don't know how these would help me if I were, you know, in your shoes, get better as these metrics themselves. I'd have to I don't have an answer, but it would have to do something with, you know, how many unavoidable activities were there lots of storms, or were there not many storms and we just kind of sucked, or there are lots of storms but we did great from these metrics? They just don't do it for me. And so, you know, comparing them to others is probably useful, but, you know, some of the discussion is like saying, well, we want to take out the 10%, you know, the major event days. I'm saying, well, actually, if we have major event days, we should be better prepared. We should have a system that's better prepared. So maybe we shouldn't take them out, right? I mean, if we're going to have major events all the time, we better get damn good at handling major events. So it's almost like a highly non-constructive set of comments, I know. You know, and part of me is like, just say this is industry standard, let's tweak it a bit, but I'd love to see something creative that really helps us understand. I mean, this is kind of, to me, they want metrics, let's give them the industry standard metrics. I don't see how it will help us, and particularly as we go forward in trying to justify something like grid mod and its expense, which is a reliability based do we really expect these to go the right direction they're supposed to go? Or what do we expect to happen? Could we set targets based on that when we hit them, or should we have other metrics? So I'm not, I'm just not intrinsically very satisfied with it.
I'd just like to briefly say I completely agree. I might not have said I hate safety KDC, but I find them just as unhelpful.
So maybe if I can provide some anchor or grounding to that comment, and I think that's a very good and useful comment, because I agree with you, other than I am a utility guy and I love Sadie, Safi, and Katie, my three cousins.
Sounds like you're a bigamist.
Yeah, so if we could go back to slide 4. So, and I'll talk through some of these numbers here and maybe make a little bit more sense out of them and what they mean to me as a utility person. So when I look at these numbers, say 23, 24, and I look at major event days included, major event days excluded, I say, hey, there's a big number of outages in Sadie, right? There's a big number there, almost 3 times in some cases, like in 2023, it's almost 3 times. It's more than 3 times.
I'm sorry, what are you comparing? Excuse me, I'm just.
So looking at the calendar year 2023 on this slide, Sadie for major event days included, the first column after the dates, compared to major event dates excluded. So the 154 compared to the 43. What that tells me as a utility person is you had some storms and you had a lot of restoration work that caused a lot of customer outage minutes. So the decision there is to look at, hey, during normal operations, 43 is a pretty good number, right? When you look at PG&E's 200 number, you look at Alameda, Santa Clara, their numbers that are, higher than that. You look at the quartiles, right, for the nationwide in the 80s, 43 is half of what the nation is performing. That's a good number. When you look at the major event days included, you look at the storm response and say, well, there's something there that happened. So what do we want to do with that? And then from a utility perspective, you look at what's the value of the service versus the cost of the service. So could we rebuild the system to prepare it to manage those winter storms and staff up, or hold staff over in the evening? So have staff 24 hours a day during a storm or during winter to reduce that number, and what's that cost, right? And that's kind of an internal discussion that staff would look at those. But those are the things that staff could look at that and say, we're going to reduce those things. 2024 is the same thing. There were some winter storms that caused that thing. Now, when we start to look at 2025, there wasn't a lot of winter storms. You don't see a lot of major event days or outage minutes being excluded, but you do see summer major event days. And when staff goes back into the details and looks at those outages, what we found is that we have some large circuits that have been built out over time that they serve more than 10% of the city's customers. So that one equipment failure on that circuit automatically triggers a major event day. And so it gets back to the original comment that Commissioner Motter provided, is that is this something that's, something we wouldn't want to prepare for, or is this something that, wow, we should really dial in and manage? And that's some of the benefit of excluding major event days, or pulling those large outages out of the system and really analyzing them. So it's not that staff just excludes them and doesn't look at them. It's that we pull them out separately and look at those things separately.
Barry, how many major event days did we have last year?
Let me look at, I have that number here for you. In 2025, there was 4.
It's a rhetorical question, but obviously, like, why is the number of major event days not something that we track? I assume you do. What were the major events? Did the major events affect all of Palo Alto, or did a tree fall at the top of Page Mill Road?
Yeah. And we have a backup slide for that, so maybe we can bring up the backup slide.
But again, it's a rhetorical. I don't need the data. The point is, I think when Bob or Commissioner Phillips talks about something creative and more of a breakthrough, I mean, I endorse the comment. This, from my point of view, if I were in your shoes, this would be a worthless management tool. I would not. I mean, I heard the points you made, but it's so high level. Like, where were the outages? This kind of presumes that all outages are created equal. Did they affect one neighborhood lots of times? did they affect residential or commercial?
So,
If commercial, was it law firms where they could just send the people home to work, on Zoom, or was it a bunch of biotech companies with their refrigerators? I mean, we don't know. And as I said in my public letter, it's like, one of the problems with MED is that, it treats 100 outages for 10 minutes. You could have 10% of your customers have like little bitty outages, and you could have 9% of your customers with huge outages, and those 9% go unnoticed or unexcluded. I mean, it's just so arbitrary. Let me maybe just back up and say I sent a public letter, and do you have any comments to the questions that I raised?
so what staff needs as far as guidance and setting of goals is we need a system level number, like, okay, where do you want to get to, right? And then staff can start to look at these things from the experience and the basically industry practices. They say, okay, what's going to take to get below this number? And that's where solutions come, right? That's where the actual, something that's actually measurable, concrete, comes before the council to say, okay, what does this look like? And so as we talk through this and try and anchor this thought that Commissioner Phillips put together here, is that staff will take this target and say, like, hey, if you want to reduce major event days, okay, that's looking at something different as far as operational. How do we prepare and staff for winter storms, right? If we're looking at something like the major event days that are occurring because we have these large circuits that represent more than 10% of the customers, that's a different approach. And so staff would look at that and say, like, okay, what can we do to put section lane device out there? What are we doing for preventative maintenance to proactively replace that equipment? What are we looking at? An example of the Colorado circuit that runs all the way into the downtown, runs past the Hopkins substation, the 4 kV substation that we are planning to rebuild. What does staff look at that and say, like, oh, if we had a Hopkins substation that was at 12 kV, could we break up that circuit? And therefore, if there was an outage, it would only affect a half or a third of those customers. So therefore generate only a third of the customer minutes. And so those are the details. So what staff is asking for is, let's set those high level system-wide goals. And then staff can look at that and say, like, what can we do to meet them, right? If you want to set high level stretch goals, staff will look at that and see what is it going to take to meet it. There may be rate impacts, but again, we have a lot of funding for grid mod, and we want to kind of leverage that as much as possible. But that's the next step, is staff providing those projects that reduce these numbers. But we need some direction of where the goal is. And I think we want to also to have that bumper sticker, that simple phrasing for the customers to say, what is the reliability? So when you're thinking about electrification, you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle, how comfortable are you in being able to charge at home or heat your home or take a hot shower in the morning? And that's really what we're asking for, is like, let's set the target, staff will come back with projects.
Yeah. I just want to pause and thank you very much for like giving us kind of a lens into how you look at a table like this, because as you just said, like, it's actually really hard for us to get meaning out of these numbers, but to have them interpreted is frankly awesome and helps us understand how that translates into utility change. So that was great. I think that the other thing that I want to just acknowledge across the board is, like, it's really hard to articulate the counterfactual, right? Like, if we didn't, invest in, if we hadn't have invested in all of these changes, we would have had more outages. Like, you can't do that experiment on our power grid. We want a reliable power grid. And so don't experiment on that, obviously. But it can make it really hard to value the ongoing maintenance work that you guys do. I think that the third point and final kind of comment I want to make is that the development of a cost reliability curve is ultimately where we want to go, right? And you said this yourself, Sherry, like, you're coming back and you're saying, well, is it worth spending all of this money on a transformer upgrade just to cut those minutes in half, or cut those minutes by 2/3? And that's a that's very much a discussion that we are going to have as you bring projects forward. And I really love that idea of like, maybe one of the goals is not just what the metrics are, but also a goal that the utility evaluates new projects on the basis of some sort of cost reliability curve, so that we're prioritizing investments in places that maintain or enhance reliability of the grid, right? Already something that I'm sure you do, but that could be a good metric for you to share with the public and share with us, so that we better understand the rationale for some of those investments.
Thank you. That's great. And understanding that value add, Terry has done a deep dive with the engineers in terms of looking at that. And, we do take obviously a look at the major event days. Another agency, they put on maps, GIS, in terms of the outages, the types, the locations, the type of failures. And as Terry had brought back to the UAC before, is what were the types of failures, right? So, leaning into explaining what these projects will do in terms of sectionalizing or equipment replacement, because as you replace things in the field, that maybe in a useful life, you'll see some improvements. So making those quantifying those values is very helpful.
Yeah, I guess, Terry, my recommendation is a couple fold. The first is that I think in addition to like a major event day subset, it would be really useful to have a weather event subset versus this was like an equipment failure subset. And I don't know like how you differentiate between those two things, or if there's any easy way, but one feels like it's our fault and the other feels like, force majeure, like there's some things you can't control. And for the things you can't control, like clearly the benchmarking to, local, right, like local, other local agencies in terms of time, like recovery time, is super valuable because we're all experiencing the same weather event. And if there are spikes in 1 year, ours is going to spike in 1 year. And you see it. There's so much volatility year over year in these numbers that like setting steady averages feels somewhat futile, right? I mean, like, especially because it feels very weather driven. But I would like to see a differentiation between weather responsiveness and our equipment responsiveness, so that you're not, frankly, we're not selling grid mod as this thing that's going to improve reliability, and then we get a bunch of worse storms and like, we want to improve reliability, but at the same time, there's just like a limit, right? For cost.
So maybe to suggest, the 2.5 beta method is, I think, a better method, but because the reliability is so good in Palo Alto, actually everything becomes a major event day. So that's why we've gone to the 10% piece of it. But what we could do is put the caveat on the 10% is say that, hey, it's not a single outage, right? It's not related to a customer or equipment failure, right? And then, or if you want, if that's the discussion with the commission, do you want, hey, we really want it to be weather dependent or some external factor to the city, a natural disaster or something like that, or some type of event like that. So what I would suggest for staff, it would be easier is just to say, hey, it can't be just a single outage. It has to be multiple outages. And then that would probably clear up a lot of this.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, like this, I could see you could have like, yeah, I mean, if it was just a single outage, you're saying if it was a single outage, that would clearly be our fault, but because it wasn't segmented enough, like the grid wasn't resilient enough.
Potentially, right? I mean, there's two different ways you could look at it. You could say there's a plane that crashed into the transmission and there's a big singular outage, right?
Yeah.
That's really external, or you could look at something like the Colorado feeders that are long. And so what staff can do is we can start to pull that stuff out and say like, hey, are these truly major event days, or is this really something we want to dive into and invest a little bit of money to limit the scope of that outage?
Yeah.
And that's fine. Again, that's the second part of it. So as we look at these, if we start to move more of those major event days out of the exclusion piece and including those and looking at it, then we'll start to see some higher numbers. But we'll also be able to drive more work towards trying to lower those numbers. And again, getting to that point, I think the weather events that's probably the third or fourth tier of what we would try and look at as far as like where are we spending our money, and we're trying to look at more of like, hey, on the routine day-to-day stuff, tree trimming, equipment failures, that is really the focus of staff. And so over the next 3 to 4 years, staff would focus on doing on that. You would start to see some results in these numbers, and they would consistently go downward.
Yeah.
And then you could have this discussion about what do we do for major events?
Yeah.
Major weather events.
Without being prescriptive, because
Yeah.
I don't know enough about these to be prescriptive. Like, this is your area of expertise. But what I would say is that the yearly numbers have super high variance. And so it's hard to track progress in anything that has high variance. So how do you constrain the variance, which I think I assume is weather related, but you're telling me that it's actually maybe several other things, so that you can actually show progress. And that's where subsetting, that would be my intuition. But if you have a better way to constrain variance so that we can see a relatively smooth line going down, I think that's where that's easier to track.
It's I think separating the exogenous variance, in other words, the things we don't control, which everybody's saying weather. I think, as you mentioned, a plane crashing into the lines, from the things that we do control, which are response time, which are failures due to inadequate maintenance. Again, I would just say, let's look at it from the point of view of 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line. City council is going to go back and say, okay, we've spent X $100 million on this. How has it improved our reliability? This process, I don't think, could show it. Can you prove that reliability is better? I think these numbers, from what I see, would just continue bouncing around. Sometimes it'd be high, sometimes it'd be low. We have a good weather year, they're low. How do we see the improvements that we're making and investing in, frankly, as a city?
And that is the intent from the utility industry, is why did you create this major event to define that? Is really to pull out those events and really have this consistent, like, what is the day-to-day average? And so you have a little bit less of the variance from year to year to show that. Now you can look at these numbers and do like a 3-year average to smooth that out a little bit more and really show where's a trend. Are you trending downwards on a rolling 3-year average, or you're not? So we could set goals based on 3 years average versus a single year, and that would help to smooth some of that as well. Again, just these are imperfect. I would agree with that. They don't message well for the customer. I agree with that 100%, but they are the utility industry standards. So I need something to kind of like, where do we want to coalesce with?
And again, I'm supporting, I think, Chair Mauder in finding how do we separate the exogenous from the endogenous, the things we don't have control over, which is the weather, and the things we theoretically do have control over, which are maintenance failures and our response times.
And I mean, obviously, we want fast response times to bad weather, right? So it's the first, including everything, is still valuable.
Yes.
But then, like, to give you guys credit for the hard work you're doing on isolating sections of the grid, of improving robustness, of investing in tree trimming, like demonstrating the value of that is going to be easier if we pull those things out. I will say, to your credit, you've done a really nice job on these like 4 nines availability target. I think that's intuitive, right? It's saying 99.99% of the time, when you turn on the light switch, your power is going to be there. And I also think that the 190 minutes is like, it's really valuable for customers to think about, okay, if I had a backup battery, if I was going to invest in a backup battery, how big of a backup battery would I invest in, right? Or how long could I really go without power? And am I comfortable with that, right? Is there any health or safety problem with that, right? And I think that's really, I appreciated like setting a metric specific to that as well, because it informs how an individual action, how individuals could protect themselves against unreliable, it's like, outages, with the caveat that an average is not, indicative of any single customer.
Yes.
Right?
Kind of to add to that and also kind of take it from another angle. And again, thank you for the presentation. I think you got to the heart of the question, what feedback you're seeking from us. So that's much appreciated. Taking a step back, part of what I think council is trying to get at is we need goals to show residents that these investments we're making in grid are awesome and are going to improve reliability, such that you can ditch your gas system and electrify. You made the point yourself. Most of the minutes a customer is experiencing in an outage right now, and I think I did the math through all of the years, I found it was 68% of the minutes from your table are all in the major event days. And so most of the customer outages are in major event days. And I agree with the chair and the vice chair that we should be looking at, what are those exogenous factors versus the endogenous factors, because that might help us be more precise with our major event days. But I also think, a customer looking at electrifying, they're thinking, I want the gas for that major event, right? I want it when that winter storm comes so I can still cook, so I can still take a hot shower. And I think we need to have an answer to that. And I don't know, I've been racking my brain ever since you asked for creative ideas to this. I don't know how we can promise Palo Altans that. One comparison that might be useful, because we don't control the weather, right? And maybe we can help increase reliability at extra cost, and maybe that's a discussion we can have. It might be neat to have a table of showing the major event, like here, this winter storm on this day, it knocked out power. Can we also show that it knocked out gas? I don't know if that table is helpful or not. It might actually show that gas, keeps going, and because it's gas is mostly undergrounded. The problem I have with the current goals, and I think we've touched on some of this, is we meet two of them with like an enormous margin, so that it's not really helpful for Palo Alto, and maybe that's what the city council picked up on. By my math, outperformed De Anza on all metrics, including excluding MED. On the SAIDI, SAFE, KD, including MED, SAIDI, SAFE, excluding MED, we meet those goals 3 to 14 times over. We fail only on KD excluding MED. We're in the top quartile of SAIDI and SAFE excluding MED. And then on the new metric that's imposed, the 4 nines, we met that last year with a pretty good margin. We've only failed it, one year. And so I don't know if that's the best metric, if we're looking for a Palo Alto specific metric to show improvement. And so I actually, it's funny, I came to the meeting planning to ask you to come back with ideas on how we can have more Palo Alto specific goals to show that kind of improvement. Just a couple ideas I had were, would it be helpful to look at the percentage of outages that we were able to restore within 4 or 8 hours as something we could look at? Would it be helpful to look at our 10 worst performing circuits? And that way we can maybe look directly at restoration efforts. Maybe that's what we can control in a major event day. And, maybe we can't promise it's not going to go out in a bad storm, but we can promise, within a couple hours, you're going to have the power back most of the time. I think that could be a really helpful, selling point in electrification. And then looking at those circuits, and I think that gets back to the kind of, are there any endogenous kinds of problems that we're not looking at yet? So those are just some of my thoughts on these goals as they stand. But I'll keep thinking about an email if I think of anything else that might be creative. Thank you.
I have a couple questions, and then also have some thoughts on the goals. I looked back at a prior presentation that had SAIDI. It was like the annual report, I think, and they used fiscal year, and these numbers are calendar year, and they're different. I think because the seasons must roll into a different year depending on where you cut off the date.
Mhm.
So can you talk about why we switched to calendar year, and are we going to be measuring on calendar year or fiscal year?
So we make comparison to on the national level and regional level, all the other utilities do it on calendar year.
Okay.
So when we compare a fiscal year to a calendar year, it's not truly an apples to apples comparison. So moving to a calendar year provided that more consistent time period, especially with PG&E in Alameda and Santa Clara. for that regional look and that seasonality that you're going to see. If you have an early winter storm or a late winter storm, that'll split, but it'll be consistent when we make those comparisons, and that's the intent.
Okay. And then I had a question about Katie. So our goals, are comparing to the top quartile. We compare well on SAIDI and safety, but not Katie. Can you talk about why our Katie measurements are higher than the top quartile? And they're also higher when excluding MEDs than they are including them. Can you I think it's something to do with, where we are, our system, but if you could explain that.
So drawing on my experience from a large California utility and working many outages on that, larger utilities that have a lot of outages, a lot of those outages are transitory or unknown outages where the turbine rolls out there, they test the line back in, it holds, they drive off. There's nothing for them to call out a crew and repair. And so that duration, those outage minutes and that time to restore is much shorter in those cases. So if you had a branch that fell through a line, tripped a fuse, and you just went out there and refused it, it's a very quick restoration period. For the city of Palo Alto, the large percentage of our outages are equipment failures. So we don't have a lot of unknown outages. We don't have a lot of blips in the system that cause an outage and we just go out there and just refuse it or close the breaker and it holds. We have something significant that's failed. We have to find that failure, isolate it, and then repair that equipment before we can restore all customers. And that's what drives up that duration for customers that are affected by outages.
Got it. So would you expect with grid mod and upgrading our aged system should improve, Katie?
That's the intent, is that with grid mod, we would build those ties between different circuits. We would rebuild East Meadow and Hopkins substations so that we have more 12 kV systems. So we can shorten some of those circuits, more capacity. And so that would inherently would shorten or reduce the scope of the outages. There's other things that we can do more immediately, near term, to break up and isolate the circuits. But that is really what grid mod's going to do, is it's going to provide that reliability and that redundancy so that we can quickly restore customers from another source should they have an outage.
Okay.
I mean, and also looking at one of those other cities mentioned here, we're getting better data now, right? As Terry has mentioned, and getting better data on our outages and also where they're at. So we can take a look and do a deeper dive of where we're having repeated outages, the locations, and really hone in on that. So using GIS, using that information, creating heat maps, finding those, a part of that process of getting that information and being more, using that better to how we do reinvestments in our infrastructure.
Yeah.
And as you may recall, Terry broke some of the grid mod projects up by capacity, resiliency, and then reliability, right? So as we go through these projects, it's good for us to highlight, what this does for the community, not only for making sure we have capacity for them when they electrify and add more vehicles and know that they can do that, also for the businesses that want to expand here. And then look at that reliability and showing that once this project comes in, this is kind of that value add as we do grid mod over the years.
Yeah. I just have a few more questions and comments. So I guess I'm a customer. I've been a customer for 15 years. I kind of remember, I was going back to look for the data because I feel like we used to have more outages at my house than we have now. Like I almost never have an outage at our house. And that's when I came across fiscal year, and I did not come across anything from much older. I wish I had, and we could see like a line graph of what's been happening over the last 15 years, just to understand kind of long-term health. Because I agree that the numbers are bouncing all over, but there might be a trend if we looked for longer term. So it'd be helpful to maybe understand how our system has aged over time with these numbers, unless you think those numbers were badly measured before and not worth looking at. I mean, then it's not worth doing. But I guess I had a couple more a couple more comments. One of them is that the whole point of this is for customers. So what do customers care about? For me personally, I've never had an outage that was like scary or, threatened my life because I couldn't use my medical equipment or couldn't charge my car, so couldn't go someplace. But I could see that those are the things people would care about. For sure, medical equipment, I could see people coming up with a backup system, right? They're going to have a battery or something as a backup. They're going to have to, like, they cannot handle an outage. Your car, if you need to go someplace, it's really annoying if you can't, charge it, especially if you have a high power charger, you do it really fast, it's out, you need to go someplace. That's not going to work. I think thinking through the use cases of outages could be helpful. I don't have the knowledge of what's important to what customer, but I feel like that should be out there. I do feel like on the commercial side, we ought to be much more clear on what they might need. For example, if we're trying to get data center customers to come here, is 4 nines good enough? Do we need to have more reliability on a circuit that's feeding a high acuity customer, for example, just to come up with the cost per outage equation? And convincing someone to move over to electric, I think one other thing I didn't see in here was the safety. So I don't know if it's better to have more shorter outages or fewer longer outages for a customer. I just don't know. To me, it's like my clocks blink and I have to go reset them, and that's a pain in the butt. I'd rather have fewer outages, but I don't think that that's a very high annoyance issue or criticality for getting people to electrify. So I'm kind of curious, are there goals, like customer feedback that we can go on that tells us which of these numbers is the most important, that we can use as our context for giving you feedback?
From an industry perspective, the frequency of outages is one of the things that the industry has tried to reduce as much as possible. So momentary outages or transient outages, there used to be a 5-second, 10-second outage, and then power would come back on. But in modern society, resetting the clocks, other things, the loss of the internet for that short period of time has not become a reliability tool. And so utilities have moved away from that and tried to find ways to sectionalize the outage to a smaller number of customer and then tried to find ways to restore it quickly. So I think reducing the number of outages is really what the customer wants to see. And then they want to see fast restoration, fast action. Customers also like to see the information coming to them about the outage. They don't like to be left in the dark, no pun intended, on what's the restoration process, when is the crew going to arrive for it, and so that's another soft benefit that the city can provide, and the OMS system that the city has employed helps to provide that communication to the customers. But again, I think it's reducing the number of outage and the duration is really, that's where the customer is going to look at it.
Okay, so I feel like safety should be a goal in here too. So I also went back to the city council meeting where they discussed this. Thanks, Chris, for forwarding that. But they, in their minutes of the meeting, they said return with recommendations for quantified reductions in SAIDI, SAFE, and CAIDI, in addition to the ones that you already presented. So I feel like all three need to be addressed. We don't have SAFE in here yet. And so I would like to see a SAFE target. Possibly it's under 0.25. And I feel like we also shouldn't ignore the including the MEDS major event days. So I know we have this goal. The second goal in here is SAIDI and SAFE excluding major event days. The average system availability, it isn't specified, but I think it's excluding major event days. I feel like we should have one also that includes major event days. And I would ask, I feel like the 4 nines, I mean, I used to work at a company with an app. We had like a 5 nines target. I would want to know, like, do we have customers who are wanting a stricter target than 4.9s, or potential customers that are considering whether or not to put themselves in Palo Alto that might request, like, if we have that information from any of our salespeople or that are out there, I'd like that to be considered. And then other than that, I basically think we should have, Sadie, Safety, Katie goals. We should have, I like the 4.9s. It doesn't seem very, like a very high goal. I agree that we met at, like, most of the time we meet it. So I almost would like to see goals that are a little bit more stretch than the ones that we see here. When I did the fiscal year, Katie, it came out to 173. The calendar year, Katie, came out to 190. Sorry, it was 210. 10% off is 190, but with fiscal year it was lower for some reason. It didn't seem correct that it could be so much different, but I would just, encourage us to set a goal that is a little bit better than what we're already doing. I feel like the 4.9s is not better than what we're doing already. We're already meeting it. So maybe it's 4.9s plus 5. I don't know what that goal is, but I'd like to see us
4.5 9s.
Yeah. 4.5.
Again, it's really that goal is driven really to try and find, like, what's that clear message that you can provide to customers. So if you did 4.5 9s, you would get to a stadium of roughly about 26 minutes, which
that would be a little bit
goal to
more of a goal
be
for us.
a little bit difficult to reach. But not unobtainable, I don't think, in most years. So we would have to do some work. It would take years to get to that point, but that is certainly one of those things that you would be working hard towards. And potentially that still meets that messaging that's desired.
Right. And I also, again, I think that the customer feedback is important for driving, where we set that goal, because if it is going to be a public goal, you want it to be one that's going to be, palatable to the customers that we want to be here in Palo Alto. Whereas residents, I do think they care about these, but it's not like I'm going to buy a house in Palo Alto versus not going to buy a house in Palo Alto. It might make them a little bit more convinced about electrifying. They definitely want them to be comfortable doing that. That's not helpful in terms of quantification, but I don't know how much you want us to actually tell you. I'm just giving you my gist is I go a little bit more aggressive because I think that's what the city council wants, is to see some improvement.
Can you help direct us in terms of what more you need to close out this agenda item?
So to include a safety goal, since the Sadie, Safety, and Katie are all intertwined, if I have a goal for Sadie and Katie, I automatically have a goal for Sadie or Safety, so I can work that out, right, and figure out what that looks like. I'm hearing the commission indicate broadly they want something a little bit more aggressive than what was proposed, and so I think staff certainly can provide that, the 4.5 9s. I think also there's some discussion about refining the major event days. That's easy. I think I can take that forward as well, and hit those comments with that. And then I think some of these other indicators, how we start to bring that forward for discussion, like the top 10 circuits and what we're doing, what programs we're doing to reduce the outages on those circuits, providing that indication of what's the longest duration outage restoration that took for the year, or did we restore customers, 90% of the customers or 80% of the customers within 4 hours. I think that's another metric that we can bring forward to share.
Great. That sounds like it's captured most of the comments here. I think those would be really helpful. My only one that you didn't reiterate back was just, this is all a cost question, right? We can have 5 9s reliability if we want our electricity bills to double, right? And so I think it's healthy to have, when we're looking at these projects, some sort of, we might bucket them in the reliability or the resiliency, but I think even within those buckets, just saying like, okay, here's how much we're paying for that. And so, it just helps set reasonable expectations vis-a-vis rates.
We can include that as well.
I'd like to
Oh, please,
comment.
please, I'm sorry.
I'd like to go back to the desire that council expressed, namely to have goals that would alleviate concerns for electrification. And I think there are sort of three things that I'd recommend to achieve that. The first is setting technical goals to ensure that CPAU has reliability we need. And I think almost all this discussion, except for a couple of the comments that Commissioner Croft made, address the technical. The second would be to use these goals, the technical goals, to convince the public so that they will electrify. And I think if we look at, Sadie and Katie, I think those are not going to make it in that bucket. It's sort of like if we were making ketchup, right? We would have goals for acidity and thickness, viscosity, and all kinds of technical things which are important to us as the folks making the ketchup and doing a great job. But we wouldn't be pitching that to the people buying the ketchup. And I think, the same thing is here to talk about why are these used, what are the right metrics to communicate with ratepayers and why are they useful? I would say that the 4 nines, is kind of semi-useful, that some people would understand that. And if you make the connection between the 4 nines and, 50 whatever minutes of outage average per year, that's more understandable that, I'm going to be out for an hour a year. And if it's for 3 hours a year, those are things that are in here, not expressed that way, but are in here that I think ordinary folks would understand. I mean, it took me a while to figure out that that's what this said. So, and also then getting down to basic things like why exclude major event days? Two problems with that. One is it's self-referential, right? Major events are defined as when 10% of customers are out. It's defined in terms of weather or a tree or PG&E shutdown or something like that. And so, just building on the conversation we already had, I think, bucketing those reasons for major events would be a useful thing. But at the end of the day, if my wife can't take a shower, I'm not going to be able to explain to her that it's a major event day and she shouldn't worry about it. That's not going to work. So I don't think we really can exclude those. But it's obviously important technically to tell us how good a job we're doing in managing the network, but it doesn't really tell us how likely it is that a customer would not receive electricity. So, I mean, really what customers want is to get electricity no matter what. And so we obviously have to keep track of those things to know what problems we want to try to solve, but it doesn't really ignoring major event days, I think, is probably not a good idea. The third thing is getting customer buy-in. And I think this is not really an engineering operations problem. I think it's really a marketing communications problem and a market research problem. Namely, we need solid communications with customers beyond the technical, because most of them won't know or care about that. And figure out how to communicate with ratepayers, how to get their buy-in, you want them ultimately to say, yes, I'm convinced, I will go all electric, right? That's the goal of the whole thing. So that's the punchline, and we need to figure out what the joke is to get to that point. And I think the other part of that is market research. Customer buy-in for electrification, I think, will likely require customer research instead of us sort of talking about it. And I'm thinking of the FTTP study. I thought there was some good research in that study, some of which was surprising to me in terms of what customers wanted. For example, customers unbundled. I was really surprised that something like 60% of people using internet in the city don't bundle it with cable or something like that. There are a lot of other little details like that that were useful. So I think it's the same thing here: is figure out what would the average customer take as information that would make them confident that they should go electric. So I think that's really critical to get to understand what would be convincing to customers as testified to by the customers. So I think this problem is about 1/3 technical and 2/3, dealing with the market communications, market research to understand what would convince people. Because I think we're, not that far off on the technical, but I think we're still a long ways to go on the marketing side. So anyway, good luck.
Okay, yep. Just, I had additional thought related to what you were just saying on the customer buy-in. So I also have a heat pump water heater. I'm pretty sure it would be hot for a pretty long time. Hot enough to take a shower for a while. It's got a huge tank of big hot water. So I think it would take a long blackout for that not to give me somewhat hot water. But on the car charging, I do think that's a major fear, right? And so one thought is we have talked before about a municipal charging station, coming up with some kind of fallback system. Say you have a blackout, we get the notification on our phone, you could, reserve a spot someplace. Something like that is not Sadie, Safey, Katie, but I think having backup systems like that could reduce the need for reduce the concern by someone who might consider electrification but is scared of that.
Just a quick question. What's the next step with this? Does this go to, are you going to come back to us? Or are you going to go to council, or what is the next step?
So if the commission would like us to come back, we could do that to clarify it, or I can take these comments, coalesce them, and go back to council and then seek their input and final potential approval.
Okay, I'm going to recommend the latter, given the composition of our 12-month rolling calendar and the priority of this vis-a-vis some of the other major topics. We deeply appreciate your work here. I think you've gotten a range of opinions, hopefully lots to work with. I think as you go to council, Commissioner Metz is correct. Like, that's obviously there's the PR step one is council, and PR step two is the rest of the community. So we wish you luck, and if you have any other questions.
Before we leave the topic,
yeah.
Please. I chipped in a few questions, but I do want to say a couple of things on this. There's been a lot of talk about, like, the purpose of this whole thing. The context is to build confidence among our customers that in electrification. But as a commissioner, I don't have a point of view, nothing to say on that topic without any confidence that this is the point Bob, Commissioner Phillips made earlier. I don't know if we're getting better or worse. I don't really know what this data is saying. So I don't have confidence, not that I don't distrust the numbers. I just don't understand the bigger, what's really happening behind the numbers. So I have a few questions. I'll come back to what Commissioner Croft asked. Katie at 245. I put this in my letter. Do we know why it is so high? Is it, I'll just read from what I said. Is it that a few long outages, a small number of big outages are skewing the average? I mean, after all, safety is low. Or maybe the meds just take out all the easy stuff because, an MED it affects all these people. Maybe it affects them all in small ways, removes all that from the number, and that leaves only the hard stuff. So, why is Katie big? Can you answer the question that's in my letter?
So typically Katie is large for the city of Palo Alto because when we do have outages, the routine outages, we find equipment failures. So say it's a transformer failed, it's an underground splice failed. It takes time, one to call out the initial troubleshooter to respond, find the issue.
You're thinking about meds now, right? Is that what I heard?
So I'm talking about outages
Oh,
regardless.
outages in total,
regardless.
sorry.
And then I'll go into major event days excluded and why that influences Katie or doesn't, right? So just to look at outages in Palo Alto. Palo Alto, when we typically have an outage, it's related to an equipment failure or something that needs to be repaired by a crew. So the initial call out, we call a troubleshooter, they respond, they do some initial investigation of the outage, find that outage, isolate it, restore customers as much as possible. In the meantime, we're calling a crew in, 3, 4, 5 people. Takes time for them to
You
get
said that
in.
before,
get in the
I heard
yard. So that equipment takes time, right? What we find in major events is that we have more outages and more customers affected, but the restoration time is a little bit quicker because staff doesn't have that travel time back in, and then some of the outages we can restore quicker.
But I'm sorry, you're talking in generalities. Why, which is it with the 245?
So
I mean,
245
I'm
is
sorry, but
equipment.
this question came up in front of council and like, what is it with Palo Alto? What's special or different? And you theorize the split between what we call exogenous, endogenous, weather versus equipment. What is the number? Like what percentage of the outages in total or the MED events, of which I guess there were only 4 this year, but uh, what is the answer? Do you know what that split is, or are we still just theorizing?
For the do I have that percentage? Can I give you that right now? Can I calculate it? No, I can't.
But you have it. That's
But
comforting. And somehow
we can make those calculations and show like how many outage minutes
exactly.
are associated with the major event days.
Where I'm driving with all this, of course, will be as you've heard, but I didn't quite hear it in your wrap up 2 minutes ago. The first thing that I would love to see is whether it's just weather and equipment or whether there's a third and fourth type of outage. I'd love to know that. That'd be where it'd start. And then I'd ask a whole bunch of questions under that, like, what was the duration and severity? Weather driven and equipment driven, and a third thing maybe. And where did it happen? Like whether you're talking about circuits or neighborhoods, residential versus commercial. These kinds of insights, at least from my point of view, would give me more confidence to say, I know what our outage posture is, and I have confidence it's getting better, and I have confidence that we can give confidence to customers to electrify. But I'll ask the question that's in my letter: where are the hotspots? We've talked a lot about circuits, but where are they? Where were all the outages last year?
So the majority of looking at, to answer that question that was proposed there, the majority of outages from October 2023 till July of 2026. And that's because
Perfect.
I have more confidence in that data than anything beyond that. So looking at that, we're looking at the Maybell circuits and the Colorado circuits as
Maybell and Colorado circuits
being the ones that are there. And some of that has to do with those are some of the largest circuits. And so when we do have an outage, it affects more customers and generates more outage minutes. Some of the work that we're doing to improve that and to find and isolate is fault indicators. And then we're also looking at sectionalizing devices. So as we do grid mod, we're looking at adding additional sectionalizing devices that would.
Sorry, what's that word? Sex line device?
Sectionalizing devices. So a fuse or sectionalizing devices.
Okay, sorry, I tripped on that. Sorry. Got it.
So a fuse or an interrupter that would break up that circuit into smaller pieces, therefore fewer customers are affected by that disruption.
Okay.
And so those are the things we're working on. And again, we do look at those major outages and say like, oh, wait, this shouldn't have happened this way. We could have actually done better to isolate that outage from the start, from the immediate point of the issue.
The purpose of my public letter was that, you get from the letter the kind of things I think a metrics outage report ought to answer. And the standard industry, Katie, that they don't answer those questions. I want to know, where are they happening? Why are they happening? How long are they happening? What is an MAD specifically? How many were there? Like it never says what they are. And by the way, are we safe to assume that an outage can be as short as 30 seconds? What is an outage even?
So
It stops right.
So we can go into a lot of these details. And so what I would try and back up a little bit.
It's an outage.
Well, but I think to where Terry may be going here is that like our agendized item is really understanding what metrics or giving feedback on the metrics that
That's what
are
I'm doing.
proposed.
Exactly. Like, what is the outage? What's it? I mean, an
Sorry,
outage
Terry,
is
I
a
cut you
minimum
off.
of how many seconds?
So what I would step back and look at is that staff needs direction on these indices, or if there's additional indices that we want to look at, is how many customers were restored within 4 hours or other goals like that. We need to figure out what those metrics are. And then staff, as the next step, staff internally will start to look at those metrics and look at those details in the outages and figure out what's the solution, what's the lowest cost solution that drives those numbers back down to meet the goal. So where you're going is you're going beyond the goal setting, which is not bad. That's a good inquisitive way to go beyond the goal setting. But again, what I need to do is really set the goal and then let staff investigate that a little bit more and come up with the projects that make sense to actually meet those goals.
Okay, well, just remind us what was in the council meeting where one councilman said it's just not good enough when someone, calls us up and complains to say, oh, don't sweat it because it's worse in Sunnyvale. And another staff, as far and then I do want to ask before we leave this topic altogether, whether I think Megan Chair Mauder mentioned herself, the connection to battery storage decisions. And part of this discussion at council that got sent back to us kind of as an afterthought, because it was really sent back to SCAP also, but was BESS and sharpening pencil and broadening the definition of benefits that come out of the BESS ROI make or break decision. And as I said in my letter, I would welcome bringing that to the, I actually think it's part of this agenda item, which on an otherwise short night, maybe we talk about, but let's keep in mind that when this topic was dealt with at council, it included the context of taking a closer, better, fresher look at whether BESS, so solar and storage, does pencil out, especially at the commercial category. And so
I'll just say I think that the point is there's going to be a range of opportunities to invest in upgrading our grid and making it more resilient. And our ask is that when we look at grid mod updates, that we are thinking about rank ordering those investments and looking across a broad portfolio.
I'll stop.
Okay, great. With that, I'm going to move on to future.
Chair, would you like to open public comment for item 2?
I am so sorry. Is there any public comment on item 2?
We do have one request to speak for item 2. Our first speaker is Peter Dreckmeyer.
Please proceed and accept my apologies.
Just a reminder for people on Zoom, this is just for virtual public comment for item 2. I believe we have some hands that went down. There are no requests to speak.
Okay, we will now move on to future topics for upcoming meetings, which is also known as the 12-month rolling calendar forecast. I have asked the utilities director to prepare a brief walkthrough of that 12-month rolling calendar and be prepared to answer any questions that we have. So given that this calendar is both a more detailed look ahead than I think we've had in the past, we often provide only 3 to 4 months look ahead in real detail. This is a little bit of a change. So I really appreciate your efforts and other staff efforts to kind of lock this in and make sure we can get a large set of items squeezed in.
Yeah, so let me just go the overview of this revised, this table for you. So we've heard from the chair and vice chair, let's really fill out this calendar with all your goals and objectives for the year. Make sure they're identified. So, that you'll see that in the column for the Utility Advisory Commission. We've also put these in kind of ranked order of priority as well. So when you see the first bullet point, that's something either you want to make sure it's going to be a high priority for you, or it feeds into maybe the finance committee or SCAP or others. We're also taking feedback on SCAP and other groups that want to bring items to us. So we're trying to do that as well. So when you look at items coming to the commission, tying it to your goals, and also if it's an informational report, heard loud and clear, you want to know if it's an informational report. So if it's something that when we look and we start managing the calendar, what we're doing there. In the city council, we've been more descriptive in what's going to city council. We have heard from this body that you wanted to know what's going there. So we've been updating this. So you'll see in this red line version that we had to make some adjustments of when these items are coming. So you'll see those going forward in terms of what is going to council and why. And then we can address some of those questions you may have either offline if you have other questions on some of these that we've done in the past and staff has offered. Deliberations, of course, we like to have in public here as this body. So that's really the first page, is really going through, everything's going to you, tying it to your priorities. I will mention the number of priorities will change in the future because a part of your deliberations, you wanted us to group those into categories and put them into more families. So we'll be doing that as we bring it forth to council. So as we bring that forth to council and is adopted, those at that point, I will adjust those numbers and also provide you with that metric on what that looks like, because this body wanted us to group them, based on maybe if it's tied to electric, tied to utility, tied to a family, or multiple
utilities. Are you talking about the work plan now or the rolling calendar?
The work plan numbers.
Oh.
So if I can go to the backside of water, the other page is really firming out the rest of the year as well. You can see that we bring forth all of the rates going to the UAC, the rate forecasts. We try to do a tentative calendar for all that. We even gone to as so far as the vice chair and the work plan that you would look at in the following year.
Is that any different than every year? We talk about rates every March, don't we?
But what I'm trying to highlight is that we've mapped this all out for the year, if I may.
Of course, that's what we do on a rolling calendar.
Excuse me, but please, let's not talk over anybody else.
So council recap, we also provide a kind of an update of that council recap, what has gone to the council in June. And then if there's outstanding items, and we talked about it, work plan items to be scheduled. If it's an item that is not fully addressed, or you don't think it's fully addressed in the items that we've described it, we try to put it and pull that out. So if one of our presentations or items talks about one of your priorities, but not fully, we want to still pull that out as something we need to address. So you'll see that there as well. And as we go through this, if you feel like, oh, this needs a little more information, it wasn't meeting that, then we can follow up there in that as well. So we're always keeping your priorities and your work plan in mind. Items to be scheduled, these are not everything, but are the main ones. So if I may, we had some discussions on that. One, you look ahead at the distributed energy resources. We heard from the UAC, you wanted that to come back in terms of the cost effectiveness, whether that makes sense or not for commercial, industrial, residential and commercial. So that has not been scheduled, but we want to put there as an item of importance because that was what this body wanted to do. And then this joint session, as I mentioned earlier, the joint session with City Council and BOSCA, and we will invite, obviously, SFPUC for a joint study session on the demand forecast. So wanted to highlight that as well in terms of something that is important that we need to put on this schedule. So that is kind of a nutshell of the overview of what we wanted to talk about here. If I can go flip back to the first page, as we look into, as I've heard loud and clear from the commission, is really trying to make sure we have items that are coming And then we will have some flexibility to move based on trying to keep a manageable number of items going to the UAC at any one time. So that agenda management is going to be very important. And we appreciate that. So we will get feedback from you and we'll try to manage that calendar in terms of the amount of time we anticipate. So behind the scenes, what you don't see here is another layer that staff puts together in terms of what we anticipate that duration is, because we want to be mindful and respectful of your time.
Okay. What I'm going to ask Alan, because you did not run by renumbering with me, is that we have approved a work plan in our minutes. I would be, if we are going to make changes to that work plan, which we approved, then you could do it under like A, B, or C, but maybe not under 1, 2, or 3, if you get my drift here, because otherwise, I think that it's hard for us as a commission to see our own contributions to that work plan and also to look back at the minutes and really track those effectively.
And the other way we can do it, we bring it to council. We can still keep the item numbers the same. We'll just group them. And that's fine.
Great. That sounds better. And the groups are A, B, and C. Perfect. Fabulous. That's going to make it easier for me to talk about. Should be useful. Okay. I think the other point, Ellen, that I'm hearing from you is that if we are going to get to all of these things, we need to get through simple topics quickly and complex topics thoroughly, but we're going to have to set norms as a commission around the length of time that any of us can talk on an item, because I don't know how to get through things like utilities reserve management policies, plus electric long duration resiliency, plus a wildfire mitigation plan update, and a commission norms presentation in a period of time that gets us home where I can safely ride on a bicycle. Okay. So I just want to be very, very frank about the fact that because of the large number of things on our work plan this year, I am going to have to take some responsibility for adhering to the times that are listed on our agendas and making sure that we get to everything. And that may be by using the clock. It may be in some other fashion. And maybe that's something we can talk about during the commission norms, which is agendized for the coming month of September.
I had a question on the content. First of all, what is commission norms?
I'm going to defer to the director or
we have the assistant city manager.
The assistant city manager is here.
And I can tell she wants to talk about this subject.
I didn't know it was our question, right?
We just wanted Kylie to come up.
Good evening, commissioners. Eileen Jose, Assistant City Manager. It's not a hard question, but appreciate the opportunity, Director Curatori. Commission norms is a conversation that our city manager personally is having with various boards and commissions throughout the city. There's been an increase, I think, across the board, as this commission has identified, of how do we effectively operate as a commission? How do we effectively advocate and provide our advice? What is our role? What are better ways to work together? And some of those kind of general operating norms. And so it's a forum to look at a general framework that he's provided all other boards and commissions, and a time to kind of talk through those with someone who frankly sits at a council meeting every week. And so Ed Shikata will be here on that night to help facilitate that conversation.
Okay. Also, what is 1 year look back at DER cost effectiveness?
I think actually Commissioner Tucker mentioned it. There was a presentation in terms of, and potentially Croft is looking at battery storage and those other energy resources, and were they viable in terms of the cost effectiveness. There was a presentation, I believe, from Jonathan Aberstein in regards to that, and one of the actions was you wanted to bring that back you wanted that item to come back to.
It was actually, this was the one I went to the council to describe. It was the cost effectiveness study that was going to be updated every 2 years. And we recommended that it be updated only for electricity prices every 1 year. So this is the 1 year electricity price update. Is that correct?
Yes, and it'll include what that looks like and does it make a value?
Right. Does it change whether we're interested in them? Because none of them were cost effective last time we looked at it.
It's not scheduled, right? Currently.
It is currently not scheduled, but is important. It was a referred item. So we want to put those items to be scheduled and not lose them. We've heard that from the UAC is like, where is this information? It was supposed to come back. I don't see it here. So we don't want to lose them. We want to make sure they're here. And this also provides the UAC is like, hey, we wanted this information back. So as time goes on and there's some further direction, we can make sure we have this as a nice bucket for the major items.
Okay, thank you.
I see, it looks like grid mod is only here as a work plan item. Is that correct? Or do we have scheduled any time where we'll revisit that? I think everybody wanted to hear about that at least once a year. Thought twice a year was what we requested, but I'm.
So we do see grid mod as part of the capital projects as well. They are identified in the 5-year and multi-year plan. So maybe something that we highlight as we give those presentations to the UAC on what those projects look like as they get developed. But I don't know, Terry, you want to add anything on
that? Plan's kind of moved around. I mean, we've changed focus. I think we really appreciated the most recent presentation. It's more granular than anything we've ever seen before. So just getting updates on what's changing versus that or progress against that plan is what I personally would like to see.
Yeah, and the intent, I think, from staff's intent, which is subject to adjustment, was to bring it back with the capital improvement plan. So as we go through this budgeting cycle, we're going to forecast what the next 5 years looks like, and we'll have that update of what have we achieved and what are we envisioning over the past 6 months. Largely, the plan is still there intact. Design elements and other things may change a little bit. Material lead times may change a little bit, and we can provide those updates of like how the scoping of the projects, how the progress of the projects are moving forward.
Is that the January 2027 meeting?
That would be what's I'm seeing on the item here.
Could we perhaps put a note that it includes grid mod? It says includes treatment plant, but just to be clear,
specific and clearer, we can do that.
Rachel, could I interrupt just to say that, Carrie, what you just said might be very appropriate every other month as part of the director's report. In other words, I'll call it an operational or a strategic, even an update on grid mod. Grid mod's so important. I don't see why it wouldn't be part of every director's report every month, but at a minimum, not that we come to grid mod maybe twice a year, but that we talk about it frequently and briefly to get updates on this big project.
Yeah, I would second all that. I also noticed that approval of bond financing for grid mod shows up on the finance committee in November and then goes to the council in December. I think it would be great if that item could come to UAC before then, so we could have our input in that process. I don't know if that would be the October meeting. It might require moving some things around, but I think that is one of the most major projects that we could provide input on as a UAC.
Are there any other comments?
Chair Mauder, could I clarify, is this discussion about rolling calendar, and when we talk about what, or are we talking now about the work plan and the 15 points?
We are talking about how those 15 points are getting calendared. Okay. That is what is agendized.
Okay, then at some point, maybe right now, I'd like to talk about the 15 points and the way the work plan is going to get finalized. I've written down my suggestions.
We approved minutes, which covered those 15
And
points.
at that time, I asked, before approving the minutes, what's up with the work plan? Because just to be blunt, the work plan in its current draft is a muddle. It's full of inconsistencies, it's full of mistakes, it's full of redundancies. And I'm glad to point out 5 of them right now if you want.
We are not revisiting the work plan in today's meeting. Director Pretori articulated that they will be grouped and organized prior to presentation to council.
And we're not going to see it again before it goes to council.
No.
Well, I mean, again, muddle, and I find it an embarrassing work product personally, and I voted for it. But I asked myself, why did I vote for it? And the answer is, well, when you draft things real time by committee, sometimes you just get beaten into submission and say whatever. But it is not. Like I said, it's not a good document.
It does reflect a consensus and real-time effort. And that is simply the nature of operating as a Utilities Advisory Commission.
Okay.
We
I'll point
cannot
out
meet
that nowhere in the work
offline.
plan, nowhere in the work plan are we going to be doing financial reviews of each utility. It's implicit, I guess, if we do rate reviews like we do every month.
We
but
do
that's
rate
not-
reviews.
But it doesn't say we'll be doing financial
Okay,
reviews.
this is not agendized, and I don't feel comfortable talking about the work plan as in terms of adding other items. We've approved our minutes. We've approved when it is going to be, or we have looked at when it is likely to be calendared. And as chair and vice chair, we will work with staff to make sure that those work plan items, as many of those work plan items as possible, make it to our meetings.
So chair and vice chair will review the edits of staff before the work plan goes to council. Is that what you just said?
No, I said that we will endeavor to make sure that all work plan items appear before the UAC.
Oh, so
Period.
that's just a calendaring thing.
That's a calendaring thing
Yeah.
because we are on a calendaring agenda item.
Well,
Are there any other questions or comments about how we have proceeded in calendaring our work plan?
I just had one more comment. I think
Please.
it's amazing the level of detail. I've seen this 12-month rolling calendar improve over time, and I think that's great. And I just wanted to commend that. We'll keep on improving it, of course, but I think this is a much stronger document than it was when it was first introduced. So thank you for putting this together. I was wondering if there's ever been, and we don't have to have a debate or answer it here on, UAC meeting biweekly, because there are a lot of important rate issues and investments the city is making. And it's a big amount of tasks we have ahead of us. It might make sense to meet biweekly and finish the meetings earlier rather than having, long stretched out meetings. So just something to think about. I know some commissions and boards do meet biweekly, and that might be advantageous. Of course, it means meeting more often, but if it means getting out earlier and having better conversations because of it, I think there might be some benefits to that. I don't know if that's something that staff would like to comment on.
I don't have the history if we've got to that level. I will mention that this joint session will be with city council, so that will probably be during their council meetings. So you will have an additional meeting as such. I think some of the UAC in the past have looked at subcommittees in looking at some of these, so they can do that deeper dive and bring it back. That's another option that the UAC has used in the past to try to do that, but then that requires that model to be used. The subset really does that deeper dive and brings it back to this.
Right. And we will be using that as appropriate, but we were also really clearly guided in the past year that is not, there are not standing committee items. And so that's something that we'll bring up during the norms discussion, or an opportunity for us to ask questions about those city rules.
Yes, those are typically ad hoc in terms of that. They're not repetitive because we cannot do that for the Brown Act.
Right.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add my appreciation of the improved format as well. I find it really useful in the amount of information I was able to track things through, like when we're saying and when finance committee is saying, when city council is saying, it gave me a much better picture of how things will be moving. So just thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Okay,
I have one more comment.
okay.
Okay, so there was an item on the work plan that I felt strongly about, which is just communication methods. And I see that there is a customer satisfaction survey result. It's coming on the calendar in February. I think the gist of what I was looking for is how is everything that the utility is doing, how do customers know about it? I have no idea like what percentage of customers have an email or text with us. How many of them go on to the portal? We have had that number, shared with us before. It was like in the 20% area. People who get paper bills get all the inserts. The inserts are fantastic. The problem is, everyone's going digital these days, and they're just a little, they're a little click here on the bottom of your emailed bill. I don't even know how many people open their emailed bill, especially if they have auto pay. So, like, how are we getting our information in front of customers? Like, do they, I know we have certain mailings we give them that are required, but it's usually a single topic. So that was the reason for that work plan item. And I think it would be worth starting someplace just to understand, we have a lot of things that we're trying to convince people to electrify, and we don't even know how many people we're communicating with. So I'd love to have like a base setting. Maybe it's even an informational item, and then we turn it into something else.
I think that you're right. It might be a better for an informational item, is that's a summary of it, so that you can read it, and really trying to get the surveys really gives you that breadth of understanding. And we can bring in the company has done that surveys, and we can get your input on what those feelings are. So, providing some our communication channels, the engagement, that information, that could be an informational item, and we can work that in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One more question, please, and it is actually about the work plan, or about the rolling calendar. I'm very worried about the 2nd of June next year, because on the 2nd of June, the work plan is on the agenda next. And so timing, we're setting ourselves up for exactly the same theater as we have just had, drafting by, real time. Why don't we talk about the work plan in advance of June, so that we have a hope of getting a work plan out our door, let alone like back from council before the year's a third done. I'd urge us to look at all these items, and Utsav raised one of them just a minute ago. But if we're looking at every item with the question, is there enough time after that item to be of any impact at all? So a good one is work plan. We're talking about
for work plans. Fiscal or calendar?
Fiscal.
It's fiscal. Typically, it's after the appointment of the commissioners.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure everyone's seated.
Correct. And then,
and this past year, we did it in June, and we did it for 12 months. So it would be, I think, a little bit disenfranchising of this current UAC to not follow through on that 12-month work plan. Personally, I'm happy to entertain suggestions otherwise, but we've all put a lot of time, thought, and effort into formulating that work plan, and I would hate to see things drop off.
I'm just saying, do it in its timely way. So it may take 2 sessions. I don't know, but
could we spread it then between the June and the July session to avoid the disenfranchisement? So we
well, is the issue that we think that it's scheduled too late, or that we would like to change how it is formulated?
My issue is that we not do it like we did this time. And
okay, but we
year.
need to be specific about what the issue is.
I guess my recommendation would be talk about it in April, and then talk about it in May. Finalize it in May.
I do not know what the calendar is for work plans or what the rules are around those, but why don't we talk to Ed about that next week or next month when we are talking about how we run these commissions. Okay, awesome.
I think this year when we had a questionnaire go out ahead of time, that was helpful just to
Agreed.
not be shared amongst the commissioners, just to raise your top topics. So that should go in advance like it did this year. I don't know about the timing, but
Great. I agree. I think that worked very nicely. Okay. We'll move on now to any commissioner comments and reports from past meetings and events.
I have a report out as the UAC representative on the Urban Water Management Plan meeting City Council had on June 8th. I actually didn't end up saying anything, so I'll just report out what I observed at that meeting. Staff made their presentation and recommended adoption as prepared. Stated that the plan was due to the Department of Water Resources by July 1st. Filing on time preserves eligibility for state grants and loans, including a $192 million water loan. Staff's position was that the UWMP is a regulatory compliance document required to use the supply reliability figure and was required to use the supply reliability figures that SFPUC provides. And that is not the forum for contesting SFPUC's design drought. And they had not vetted some of the additional amendments in the letter that I had drafted and was forwarded by this body to the council. Public comment ran long, and most of the comments were supportive in asking council to incorporate the amendments in the letter. I observed 5 different takes by council members. So I thought I'd give all 5 takes, if that's helpful to this body, on different mechanisms of getting those amendments into the urban water management plan. So council member Lithcott Hames asked whether there might have been a parallel track, whether in her words, this is not our only shot. Councilmember Liu proposed a transmittal letter carrying the points up front rather than dotted through the document. Councilmember Reckdahl asked the city attorney whether there was any downside to including policy remarks in a compliance document. The city attorney answered that he was not aware of any significant legal risk from including these comments. Councilmember Burt said that he had been initially inclined to ask that the staff incorporate Commissioner Gupta's comments to the maximum extent it is compliant. He had been surprised that there had not been a review of the points in that letter more substantively, just given the length of time. And he had noted that the underlying positions of the letter are quote unquote consistent with past council direction. The mayor then proposed a kind of a caveat language in order to move the discussion forward. That motion carried unanimously 7-0. So it did 3 things that I observed. It adopted the plan so that the deadline was met. It added a caveat to the document stating that while the city's response is based on SFPUC's design drought and supply reliability analysis, this is not an endorsement of or concurrence in that analysis, and that the city reserves its right to object in other forums. And it directed staff to bring the underlying issues back for a study session, as we've discussed, after the summer break. In addition, Vice Mayor Stone had described that the BOSCA chair had confirmed that the design drought would be agendized at BOSCA before the summer, and I believe that's the meeting that just recently took place. Director Curatori asked that the issues be referred back to the UAC so this commission can deliberate as a body and make a recommendation before council picks it up again. And the city manager has suggested it might be held as a joint session with council. The mayor agreed, and I think that's the to be agendized item we see in our 12-month rolling calendar. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other report outs from meetings or events? Okay, if not, we'll turn to virtual public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak?
We do have 2 requests to speak online. Our first speaker is actually a spokesperson for a group of 5 people online. For the City Council's meeting policy and procedures, a spokesperson speaking on behalf of 5 people is granted up to 10 minutes of speaking time. One moment while I pull up the presentation. Alex, you now have permission to unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners and distinguished guests and colleagues. For the past 3 years, I have worked with foresters, firefighters, and leading scientists to understand the technology gap that limits our ability to see changing wildfire conditions at the regional, neighborhood, and parcel level. Palo Alto and Santa Clara County have already made substantial investments in wildfire planning, fuel mapping, vegetation management, and undergrounding. Our goal is to build on top of that work. We have developed a platform that combines fuels, structures, live fuel moisture, terrain, and weather into one simple operational view of the wildland-urban interface, refreshed as often as every 3 days. It helps agencies prioritize inspections, measure treatments before and after, and model how fire and embers may move under dry offshore winds interacting with the foothill terrain. I'm here to present what we have built and propose a 90-day memorandum of agreement with the city of Palo Alto so firefighters, utilities, city planners, and community stakeholders can experience its operational value firsthand. This is the next leap in artificial intelligence. With that, I would like to present our slides. Next slide. Wildland firefighter Timothy Inglesby says it correctly here. We surpassed our human limits to stop this. The recent LA megafire shows our approach to fire needs to change. And just today, it was released by LA County on the exact transmission line that caused the spark for the deadly Eaton and Palisades fire. When we look at Santa Clara County, and particularly the Palo Alto Hills, it's a matter of when, not if. Next slide. And Timothy Inglesby, when he talks about the approach, all of the wildland firefighters that I've spoken to, every single forester, and even the top scientists in the United States understand the underlying technological issue with how we're seeing risk. And that is a 1980 satellite that was launched by USGS that is still in use today that utilizes a 30-meter pixel grid. That 30-meter pixel grid combines homes, roads, terrain, and it considers the urban environment as non-burnable. Next slide. And since I've been spending time, I have built the platform on top of GIS. GIS is an incredible tool that was able to digitalize maps, and it gives you an enormous opportunity to visualize risk. It is not able to simulate and run physics-based modeling with granular data. And that is what I've built today, is through simulation, bringing the actionable intelligence to the communities and the firefighters and the people that are making the decisions. Next slide. This is a recent CWPP from the San Gabriel Valley that was just signed off by Chief Maroney and Chief Weishaupt from LA County. And it notates the limitations of current fire models, which is using the input of that 30-meter pixel. Next slide. Here we have a city, 31 different cities over the San Gabriel Valley that over 56.8% of their recent CWPP and the modeling and the risk and all of the intelligence to the community actually considers the urban environment as non-burnable. This, again, was noted several times by their contractor, Jensen Hughes, that is due to a modeling and technology limitation. Next slide. This is one of our other partners in the city of Glendale. This is their mapping of the vegetation and structures as well with the 30-meter pixel. Next slide. And this is what it looks like with our updated 1 meter per pixel. And we're utilizing Sentinel-2 from the European Space Agency, which carries 12 bands and also a red edge band. So it's looking at the vegetation health, live fuel moisture, and it's able to classify vegetation and see its growth over a time and period, and it passes over every 3 to 5 days. Next slide. Here we're looking at homes that have the highest risk based off of terrain, slope, live fuel moisture, vegetation type, and we're able to see where we have flame lengths of over 12 feet so that we can prioritize inspections and also see which areas are most at high risk, which would also include taking a note of those areas that have utility lines as well and other possible factors that could cause widespread urban conflagration. Next slide. I'll pass on this, but this is the platform that is being used today in Southern California by firefighters and city planners. It's integrating several scientific models that we've developed. The back end is extremely complex and happy to spend more time explaining what each tool does. Next slide. These are the layers that we're using. I just mentioned Sentinel-2. We're using embeddings as well, where we combine satellite data over a time span of many years. In this case, I've been looking at data for Santa Clara County, actually for the entire Western United States since 2016 and running different models. We're implementing a newer 3D rendering, which is called Gaussian splats, which then we're running a physics-based fire model in collaboration with some of the larger technology companies here in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. And all of this data is put into an easy-to-use platform that the firefighters can use on their iPad. Next slide. This is a bit on the 30-meter pixel compared to the updated 1 meter per pixel. Sometimes we bring it down to about 2.5 meters. With our platform, over 95% of the model is burnable. And here you're able to see the fuel model in Glendale specifically. And you're able to clearly see where areas the model confuses clusters of homes and considers them as non-burnable. Next slide. These are embeddings, and I'll show you one of Palo Alto at the very end. Next slide. More on the Gaussian splats. We can speak about this another time. Next slide. And another amazing part of the fact that we've had an industrial revolution with computing and artificial intelligence is you can run these very granular computational fluid dynamics simulations. Here we're looking at the Southern California with Santa Ana winds. For Palo Alto in the foothills, we would be looking at the Diablo winds and seeing where embers could spread, where we're getting the offshore winds, where they're blowing, so we know which homes are in the wake of the turbulence. Next slide. And in this case, we're scanning hundreds of parcels in LA County today. For the case of Palo Alto, we can keep an eye on hundreds of parcels as the vegetation changes, the weather changes. We're keeping an eye on it and able to run fire models each day, depending on the weather and what's happening the day of. Next slide. We're working closely with the community, and that's where the magic happens, is bringing the actionable intelligence to them, hosting workshops and working closely with the fire departments, and also obtaining grant funding, which I'd love to see the possibility of applying for grant funding for the city of Palo Alto. Next slide. And community trust is our number one priority. We're not an insurance data broker. We are not a zone zero enforcement program. It's really important that we work together with the communities to make this intelligence actionable. Next slide. And here's the platform in use. I hope the sound works. Okay, so the sound is not working. And this is a joint meeting we've had with many of the stakeholders in the Southern California region. And as we're building this model, our plan is to expand it to Northern California, creating a queryable model. So this is the ChatGPT moment for the city, state, local officials, particularly first with fire. We're cracking the code with that first and can go to many other industries as well. And so since the sound is not working, we'll go ahead and skip this slide and move on. And there's another slide after this.
I'm sorry, we're out of time, so we'll need to end the public comment at this point in time. Could we please move on to the next public comment?
Yes, one moment, please. Our next speaker is Peter D. Peter, you now have permission to unmute yourself.
Good evening. Peter Druckmeyer with Yosemite Rivers Alliance. I had raised my hand for item 2 and I got called. And so I lowered my hand and I began to speak. And then I heard that I had lowered my hand and there were no speakers. So I would like to request the opportunity to speak on item 2 and during public comment. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. That's totally fine. We apologize for the misunderstanding.
Okay, thank you, Chair Maurer. So my comment on 2 was, I normally don't comment on non-water issues, but I had this meeting on in the background and I was really impressed by the conversation. And so I tuned in and listened and, it'd be great if more Palo Altans heard what you guys go through and how you discuss things. I was very impressed by the staff presentation and I'm sorry I didn't catch his name, but obviously very knowledgeable and composed. And the commission, as usual, asked a lot of very good questions and made really good points. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to feel a little bit, challenged. And but our staff member was very composed and answered, and it was a great dialogue. And I think out of that, a better product is going to come to City Council. So we're very fortunate in Palo Alto to have UAC, talented people, and a process where we can vet things before coming to council. So I wanted to congratulate you all on that and to thank the staff employee. And my apologies again, I didn't catch your name. Done with that item, moving on to public comment. I didn't hear in the director's presentation on the study session on water that Yosemite Rivers Alliance would be invited to participate. Maybe I missed that. We've been trying to get a study session for a long time, and council obviously wants to hear from us. And to be honest, I don't have a lot of confidence in staff to do this right. I've said it at the council meeting during the urban water management plan that staff is more aligned with Bosca than with Palo Alto, which has endorsed the Bay Delta plan. And I know the council members support our positions, but staff has been very oppositional to that. And I am starting to reach out to some council members. I know them all. They respect me, and I'm sharing these concerns. I think it would be in the interest of Mr. Coratori to reach out to me and say, what do you want this study session to look like? How do we work together? How do we bring in council to make it the study session they're expecting and that we're expecting? We get blown off by Bosca, by the SFPUC. They don't want to have dialogue with us because it embarrasses them. And I don't want staff to fall into that. So let's do this right. I'm happy to work with staff, but you got to earn my trust just like I have to earn your trust. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public wishing to speak on items not on the agenda who are on Zoom?
There are no more requests to speak.
Okay, well, with that, thank you all for your contributions today, and to Terry Crowley, our Director of the Electric Utility. I hope I got his title correct. Senior Director of oh, you're the chief. Excuse me. I botched that. But anyway, thank you, Terry, for all of your hard work tonight. And with that, we'll adjourn. We'll see you all in September.